All right, so we're going to talk about change and why people want to change. And I'm going to start this conversation off by the podcast I listen to, Giving Women the Vote. And this is a woman who interviewed Sandra Slight Brennan, and she interviewed Eleanor Bauer and Dorothy Falter. And they were talking about like how the 19th Amendment was passed, and which was the woman allowing them to vote. And I'll talk about the story of that. And so by the end of World War I, most people thought women should vote, but the action just hasn't been passed yet. So the legislation called for the passage of the 19th Amendment, and so Congress passed through Congress, and so it needed 36 states to ratify it, and so 35 ratified it, and the last one, Tennessee, was just needed to ratify it. So in 1920, they held like a convention, and people voted, and so it was all tied up. And then this man named Harry Burns changed his vote for women to vote, be able to vote. And so it was based on a note from his mother saying women should be able to vote. And he always listened to his mother. And he said he wanted to, he said he was in favor of ratification because he believed in full suffrage as a right, and it was moral and legal. It was for it to ratify, and he always wanted to listen to his mother. So on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, and that freed 17 million women from political slavery. And I think the goals of these reformers were really just to greaten the equality of life, not just for women, but for like all of mankind, since because like before it was just always like woman after man, but I think it was just like equality for all. And so I think they realized that you couldn't live a full life without women and men just being equal. And I think it was a huge step forward for women's equality and the whole life. So yeah.
Okay, so I read Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth, and it's about an African American woman having even less rights than all other women. So like just like how Ben said that women had less rights during this time to men, African American women had even less rights because the white women were at least treated like decent, and like that they were like fragile, like people would hold the door open for them and stuff. But African American women were treated like horribly, and they were whipped just like men. And yeah.
All right. So I read the court case of Brown versus the Board of Education, and that's about this this big court case in the '60s that basically overturned a previous court case, Plessy versus Ferguson, which stated that separate but equal was constitutional. And what Brown v. Board of Education said, their verdict was that separating, especially in education, separation is inherently unequal because you get different opportunities. So the goal of this was to provide educational opportunities for African American students the same as white students had. And they wanted to achieve this goal because they thought that separating the students was based on color was inherently unequal, and it created unequal opportunities, such as even if the tangible factors, such as the quality of like facilities or how much funding they get, were similar.
All right, thanks, Summers. That was a great point. And I'm here. I'm talking about the story of an hour. And so this woman named Louise Mallard was told that her husband died, and so Mrs. Mallard goes upstairs and she cried, and she was really sad about her husband's death. But then she looked out the window and realized that was a glimpse of hope, and she realized that like I'm free now, and she's like I'm looking forward to this independency, and she was happy. And then she was going downstairs, and then she saw her husband go through the door, and then she died. She had heart problems, and but then she died like a heart attack, and she was pronounced dead from happiness from seeing him. But that's kind of ironic since she wanted to live an independent life, and I think she died from just like mourning her husband, but also looking forward to that independency. So I think the author really wanted to send the message of being independent to all women, and it's like perfectly fine to not have a man in your life. And the author wanted to assure readers that women can have independent lives, and like women might even have better lives without the man. And I think she really wanted to achieve these goals because she wanted to send a message to all women that you do not need a man in your life. You can be true to yourself. You just need to be happy, and you'll live an independent, full life.
The Declaration of Sentiments by Elizabeth Cady Stanton is just like the Declaration of Independence, but instead of men getting equal rights, it was about women getting the equal rights that the men have. And it was motivated by women that were seeking equality for everyone. And yeah.
All right, so my second piece was also kind of about Brown v. Board of Education, but it was talking about why it was a failure. Because so when Brown v. Board of Education passed, and the new law was that the schools had to be diversified. So basically people had to like commute really, really far from their own communities to go to these schools to make sure that they had about the same amount of black students as white students. And once those laws they didn't enforce them anymore, people stopped going to those schools and started resegregating because just the communities that they lived in, they didn't want to sacrifice commuting so much just to be in a school with other different kinds of people. So the goal was to show why people in African American and white neighborhoods around the country have unintentionally resegregated schools. And maybe the reason the author wrote this was so that we could find a way to diversify schools in a way that actual students and families aren't burdened with these like ridiculous commuting times.
I think that's it. Thank you guys.